Okay, let's move on to the Goldman Case, directed by Cédric Kahn, starring Arieh Worthalter as Pierre Goldman. That's the most important name here. Now, when I was watching this, I was thinking, Eric. I wonder if Eric will love this movie. You know, he's a little bit unpredictable when it comes to courtroom movies. Although, generally, if it's a straight courtroom drama, he tends to like it. And I think this is a very, very straightforward courtroom drama. Now, he does get a little thrown off sometimes, though, if they're international courtrooms because they don't follow the U.S. trial rules. This movie is no exception to that. This is taking place in France, and it is actually a depiction of a real courtroom case that occurred, from my understanding. I am no expert, so don't hold me to this. It's supposed to be in 1970. I'm trying to get the right date here. 76 is when the actual courtroom trial that we're watching is supposed to be taking place, but it's based on events that happened like around 69 and 70. So basic setup is Pierre Goldman. Now, my understanding, this is pretty true to life. So Pierre Goldman, in real life, was convicted of 3 or 4 armed robberies in the Paris area. And one of those robberies was at a pharmacy, and 2 people were murdered as a part of that robbery, and a couple more were injured really badly. What this case, what the court case is that we're watching in the movie is, it's an appeals case, because Goldman has been contending all along that he did 3 of the robberies, but he didn't do the pharmacy robbery, and he did not murder anybody. He's very adamant that he didn't murder anybody. So that's your basic setup. So it's got a really easy, understandable concept from the beginning. I mean, it's not a concept, it's something that happened, but for the viewer, you're like, okay, I understand. He's saying, I didn't commit murder, I didn't do this one, I did the other ones. So right out of the bat, you know he's not necessarily, quote, a good guy, right? He is admitting that he committed robberies and stuff. So the other aspect of this is, by the time this court case occurs, he is a bit of a counterculture hero. Why? Well, he's a child of kind of rebellious, notorious, not notorious, but I say rebellious parents. His father was part of the French resistance. His mother was involved in activities and ended up going back to Poland. He's Jewish, which becomes a big part of this. You know, the antisemitism at the time, before and after, plays a part in this. And he's also kind of notorious on the left wing in France, because not only has he written a book while he was in prison up before this case, but he's a very outspoken, critic of the police and of the system. In fact, one of his things in his life is he's really disappointed with himself, because he wished he'd become a great rebel like his parents, but instead he kind of just became a petty crook. But he thinks of himself intellectually as kind of this, force for revolution. That's kind of the way he sees himself. So this is kind of his own mini revolution. So what you get here is not only a trial, but it's kind of this back and forth between authority and rebellion, and you have a whole bunch of people in the audience that are counterculture hippie types, not quite hippies per se, but that type. So there's a little bit of trial of the Chicago 7 in this as well. And the other aspect, like I said before, since it's a French court, it's just interesting to see how the system seems to work there and how it's much more loosey-goosey. And we had mentioned this in Anatomy of a Murder, I think, which I don't think it was French, but it was European. How it's interesting in courts over there. People will just be talking, like one lawyer will be questioning or something, and then the defendant might be answering, or a witness might be answering, and then someone else will stand up and just start talking too. And it's like, that's okay. Like the other side's lawyers will start interjecting, and then maybe a person from the jury might interject, and then a person from the audience might interject. So there's a lot more of a free-flowing conversation going on during the court, even though there seems to be some rules. It's not quite 100% clear. Whatever the case may be, this is a very pure court movie. You are pretty much going from the beginning of the case to the end. There's maybe 2 or 3 small breaks where you see Goldman with his lawyers debating things, because he's also a very tough client. He's not great to his lawyers. He wants to do things his own way, and they want to do things other ways to, be successful. So there's a little bit of conflict there. I think if you like courtroom dramas, I think this is pretty satisfying. It's an interesting story. It's an interesting court trial, I think. To me, I would probably go 4 stars on this movie. I liked it quite a bit. I'm not a huge courtroom guy, but it kept me interested throughout. I think, once again, for people who aren't into that so much, it would just be too dry, maybe, for some people. But if you can kind of get into the style and the story of what's going on, I think there's definitely enough here to keep your interest throughout.